Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to a fellow financial advisor who's published books, been a regular on local TV, has hosted his own podcast since 2018, and quite frankly, seems to be doing all the creative content publishing type things all the time. So he's on the show today to spill the beans and tell us how he does it, what it's like getting OBAs approved, that's outside business activities for anyone who's not an advisor who's listening, and the way he works with his compliance office, and a lot more. I'm so excited to have Eric Brotman on the show today with us at Reaching Abundance. Eric, thank you for being here today.
This is my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for weeks since I heard about it, and I'm ready to go. I know we're going to have some fun today.
Absolutely. So first off, share just a little bit about your books, your profession. We are going to get into some exciting topic discussion around separating your outside business activities from your advisory practice, but just give us a little runway there. What are we looking at?
Well, I started in the financial business 31 years ago, which is horrifying because I don't feel that old. And then in 2003, I started a company and started a firm, and it was myself and one full-time and one part-time person. And we were trying to do some things a little differently and swim upstream like any good salmon would, and trying to build something a little unique. And over the years, it's taken on a life of its own, and some of the OBAs, and you mentioned that, have really become a very big deal for me personally, and it's helped us professionally as a team. So you fast forward, we're now 20 full-time people, 10 CFPs. I have published 3 books. I host a podcast, which I absolutely love. And I'm doing white papers and speaking gigs and I started a consulting practice, and we have a media company, and we're doing all these various things. But it all started with being a sound financial advisor and growing a practice and growing it literally one client at a time and one employee at a time. And so the runway has been, this has been sort of an uphill climb. It's hard. It's hard to start a firm. It was particularly hard in the days before the internet. Or right as the internet was coming along, and the technology wasn't great. But being able to start the practice when I did, I learned some of the basic blocking and tackling. I got all the education I could, which I think is important. And I became an authority at a young age. But being an authority, to me, is not enough to be great at what we do. And I know we're going to talk more about why influencing makes such a difference, not only to us as an industry and as a organization, and to me as a professional, but also to the community.
Yeah. So stay on that for a minute. You mentioned before we hit record that every financial advisor is an authority the day that they pass their tests. So talk to me a little bit more about that and why it's so important for y'all to step up and share your voice.
Well, in general, we don't learn personal finance at school. When we're kids, we don't learn it from our parents. We might watch them. Often we learn bad habits. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we watch our parents fight about money, or we watch them, both be spenders or both be savers and never do anything. And there's so much baggage around money. And the general public never gets real financial literacy or financial education anywhere. Not formally or informally. It's not in schools. It's not in businesses. It's not in employment. It just doesn't exist. So when you decide that this is what you're going to do for a living and you begin to get credentialed, very quickly, you know more than the vast majority of the public about lots of this. It doesn't mean you have more experience. You don't if you're young. But you have more knowledge. And being able to convey that knowledge in a way that gets people motivated to act is then what's important, because you could be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't have anyone to talk to, that's not useful. So it begins with the knowledge base, but it has to grow into an ability to reach an audience, and not only to reach them, but to motivate them to act in their own best interests. And that is a skill that I think some of us are born with and some of us learn over time, but it's an important skill for a financial advisor.
Yeah, absolutely. So walk me through the thought process of someone, maybe they've established their own practice, things are going well, they're building a team, and they're looking around, recognizing like, should I get on YouTube? Should I do a podcast? Should I write a book? Like, what's the best way to reach people? All these things are going through their head. And then that's coupled with the fact of like, okay, like what? I'm a financial advisor, and then now I want to go be an influencer. I mean, come on. Like, how do we navigate that baggage?
Well, let's start with not quitting our day jobs. I am not a podcaster.
Right.
I am not an author. I am not an influencer. I'm a financial advisor. I'm a financial advisor who happens to have a podcast and write books and do public speaking, but I am not changing my day job. And so for advisors who are thinking about adding this into the repertoire of business development and marketing and media relations and all these things, I think the first step is to realize that you're not trying to become a professional at this. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be a professional at this. I set up a small studio in our office, which I'm sitting in, put together a backdrop, got all the equipment, and it was unbelievably inexpensive and easy. I mean, this is not a major undertaking. This is a really easy thing to do in today's world. And so deciding that you want to do it is sort of step one, and then learning how to do it and finding the resources and the professionals to help you. Because like anything else, we're not naturally necessarily going to know how to do this. Our kids might. I think our teenage kids could do this tomorrow. They've already figured it out. But for those of us who are of a certain generation, it didn't come as naturally to us. And so you have to sort of learn some of the skill set and learn how this works. But I don't think it's important necessarily to decide immediately, I'm going to be on YouTube, or I'm going to use Instagram, or I'm going to use these other platforms. Be platform agnostic. Develop a message first that you think will resonate with people that you want to share, and then look at the 10 different ways that you could do it and pick the one that brings you some joy. Which one do you have fun with? Because if this is a grind and if this is miserable like anything else, you won't want to do it. If you're having fun with it, people will know. You can't fake that.
Yeah. I like that. So you mentioned of a certain generation. So I know several advisors who are a little up there in age, and they also have this mind trash around, for lack of a better word, around like, I'm too old to like start a channel or, start sharing content. Like all these young people are way better at it, way cuter, way younger, all these things, right? So like, why would I do that? And then knowing also that mindset is holding them back, because a lot of young people would like to go to someone who's a little bit older and more experienced with their money problems. So walk us through this of a certain generation situation.
Well, first of all, I reject the fact that just because someone's younger that they're cuter. Let's go with that immediately. I am not willing to accept that as fact. The rest of it, maybe. I think a lot of clients do want to work with advisors with whom they really have something in common. They understand each other, and I actually think it's usually better for clients to have an advisor younger than them. And I say that as somebody in my 50s who's been doing this a long time. And so what I realized was it was important to surround myself and build a team around the next generation of advisors. So we have 10 CFPs in our office. Half of them are under 30.
Wow.
So we are bucking the trend of advisors getting older. Now, I might be able to do a really great job on a podcast or an interview or whatever because of some of the experience that I have and because I love doing it. But ultimately, if somebody wants to join our practice, they're going to wind up working with one of our advisory teams that's already in place. They're not going to be working with me. They're going to be working with one of our teams. They want their advisor to be younger than them, so their advisor's there when they need them most. In the same way, none of us want to use our parents' doctor.
Yeah.
We don't want to use our parents' lawyer. We don't want to use our parents' financial advisor. And it's okay. And I think one of the keys to building a financial advisory business is having multi-generational clients. I think that's incredibly important. That's how wealth moves between generations. It's also then important to have multi-generational advisors. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you're a single man or woman shop and you're 57 years old and you're thinking, I'm too old to learn this, first of all, you're not. You can start this at any age and it's a ton of fun. But secondly, as you look at ways to grow and scale the practice, If you haven't already moved down the path of trying to build an ensemble or trying to groom 1 or 2 or 10 younger advisors to be part of your team, as we get older, we sort of move away from the knowledge curve and we move toward the wisdom curve. There's an incredible book written by a PhD. I wish I could remember the name, but it's called From Strength to Strength. And it talks about that shift from intelligence to wisdom. I rely on the young people in our office to have the intelligence and the knowledge. They've done their exams more recently. I took my CFP exam in 1998. There is nothing relevant today to what I studied then. Now, yes, there's continuing education and other opportunities, but we need the young people in our office to be technically sound, to be able to rattle off the rules and regs, but they haven't seen it all. And so having somebody older who's been through it, it doesn't mean you've been through everything your clients have been through, but you've been through some of it, certainly if not your own family, with other families. You've been through losing a loved one. You've been through marriages and divorces and kids and education and buying and selling houses or starting businesses or retiring or all the various big events in life. I've helped hundreds of families through that. Our young people haven't, but they are technically incredibly sound. And so, I would encourage anybody in their 50s who doesn't have a succession plan to start really thinking about the future of their business isn't them. They're a part of it. I'm not going anywhere. They're going to have to kick me out of here kicking and screaming. I'm having too much fun. But it's okay for me not to own the whole firm. It's okay for me to have partners. It's okay for me to have young people who are going to want to do things differently than I am. But as long as we're using the same basic playbook, and as long as we are making decisions by committee, you can build an incredible team. And I don't think you're ever too old to start doing that. But I do think if you're a one-person shop and you're getting into your mid-50s to early 60s or beyond, unless you plan to die at your desk and leave nothing behind for heirs, I think it's really important to build a succession plan to have a business that will outlive you. If I kiss the bus tomorrow, Virginia, this place runs. They will miss my charming personality, but the place will run.
Absolutely.
And it'll run fine. And that I'm very, very proud of that. I mean, ultimately, building a practice is exciting, but building a legacy is exciting-er. Can I use that? That's not a word, but I'm going with it. It's a whole nother level of, I think, ways to measure success is having something that you've created that's going to outlive you.
I love that. And in many ways, some of the content, or all of the content that you produce, whatever channel it's on, especially your books and things like that, those will outlive you. So share with me a little bit about the decision and the process of establishing an outside business activity, getting things approved. What is that process like? Walk some new advisors through that a little bit.
Well, some of it comes down to the type of structure that you have. Are you your own registered investment advisory? Are you part of an independent broker-dealer? Are you an employee of a regional firm or of a national firm? The big national firms where you're an employee have completely different set of rules and regulations, partly because they're so big that they have to regulate themselves based on the lowest common denominator. But if you're in an independent broker-dealer with 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 reps or what have you, you're going to want to talk to not only the compliance department, but also the marketing people and find out what they already allow. And then you're going to have to consider whether you want to be the one to help them stretch those boundaries. I've been in this business long enough to remember when compliance said we would never have a website. Ooh. We will never have email. It can't be monitored. You will never use email. It's not allowed. So I know it's not true. I know we can do these things. Some of the organizations will say we want a script, and they have a hard time understanding that none of this is scripted. I don't know what you're going to ask me next. I'm actually quite alarmed at it. But whatever it's going to be, there is no script. But we can submit all of these various things before we push out our own content. We submit them through compliance. I've never, knock on wood, I've never had one show where they've said you can't do that.
Right.
And some of it's because I know where the third rails are. Mm-hmm. You have to know what not to say. I mean, if I was going to start slinging individual securities on your show, they would say, time out, you can't do that. That's advice and it's all kinds of problems. Well, but if we're talking about ways to build a business or ways to help your family or ways to talk to your kids about philanthropy, that's not going to raise those red flags. So you need to make sure that the content itself is within the compliant realm to begin with. And assuming it is, certain independent broker-dealers I know have various rules. Some are more restrictive than others. I would say ours has been incredible to work with. I mean, we've pushed them. There's no firm in our organization who submits more content than we do. We actually, I believe, are number one in that department. So we're a nuisance. But we're a nuisance in all the right ways because it's quality content. They don't have to tell us, thou shalt not. We're not getting a lot of that. We're getting a yes, here's how you do it, not can you.
I agree with what you said. We've been working with advisory content, shall we say, for about 5 years. And I've never had something that we've submitted to compliance for our client or with our clients that's just like, nope, can't air that episode. Take it down. Like, nope. We've never had that happen. I've had remove this section or paragraph, remove this sentence. And even when I saw that, I was like, okay, fine. We're being real strict. That's okay. And that's why you have editing available. There's all kinds of amazing software. That's why you have people like my team, I would say bring in some guidance so that when you get feedback like that, you can take care of it. And it's easy peasy. It's not an actual bump in the road, right? So
it's not.
And I think that holds so many people back. So did you have any mind drama or what other setbacks or struggles have you felt with like, well, I want to do this thing, but they're saying this, or I think they're going to say no? Share a little bit about that.
You ask a great question. And before we go there, you also just mentioned something about having a team of people. When I say don't quit your day job, do not do this yourself. We are financial advisors. We're not podcasters. Don't sit and edit and do. I was at the FinCon conference once, and I watched someone record and start editing their own show in the closet so it was quiet. They literally took a microphone into the closet in their room. It was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. That's not the way I want to do this. I want this to be a professional endeavor. And while they got content out, and God love them, if you can afford to do this kind of work, hire good people and let them make you look good. I mean, because frankly, that's what happens. So you asked about what bumps in the road there were. Frankly, there haven't been many. I would say the mistakes that have been made were almost exclusively mine. I mean, I screwed up a lot of things in publishing. I screwed up in how to write things and how to design things. And the things that I could have done better always revolved around hiring good people. So, I was hired at one point to write a book, and I wrote it, and it was an experience. I learned how to do it, but it was not a good contract. So I learned about the contract. Then I self-published a book, which was great, except I did my own design, and the design was awful. And so now I have a team of people who, when we're ready to do this, they know how to do it. I'm not a book publisher. I wrote it. I'm a writer. I was an English major in school. I'm finally using that major. But I don't have to be a designer. I'm not a website designer. I'm not a podcast producer. I'm none of those things. I'm a financial advisor, a business owner, an entrepreneur, a consultant. I wear lots of hats, but one of them is not podcast producer. So I would say that the bumps that I ran into the road were mostly self-imposed. They were things that I tried to do myself and learned the hard way not to. So if I can get any of your listeners to learn the easy way, it's find good people and let them do what they do better than anyone and get out of their way. Yeah. And give them good content to work with. I mean, ultimately, you can only sell a show. You can only create buzz around a show if it's good. If it's awful, that's a whole nother story. But you can get advice on that too, on what kinds of topics should you do, what kinds of audience do you want to reach, how do you do this? I don't have the first clue how any of that is done, and it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I really love that, because the reason I started doing this is to allow people the time and energy and mental space not to sit here and have to learn new software and spend hours behind the screen, but to free them up so they have time for their clients. And then they also have content that's going live kind of automatically in the background because we're doing it for them. So
well, it's not only going live. That. It's not only going live automatically, it's evergreen.
Yeah.
See, I did a lot of traditional television. I was on Sunday morning news in the Baltimore market on NBC. It was a big deal. I was the Sunday morning finance guy, and I'd go in for a 2 or 3 minute segment on Sundays, not every Sunday, but frequently over many years. And it never created business for our firm. I would run into people at the bagel shop, and they'd say, "You're the guy from TV," but it never created business. And partly it's because those clips were largely gone. If you people don't watch the Sunday morning news because they want personal finance. They watch or listen to a personal finance podcast because they want personal finance. They're interested in what you have to say. So, and it's forever. It's evergreen. So somebody can share that show 6 months later, not just say, "Oh yeah, I saw this person on TV." So traditional radio was not successful for us. Traditional TV was a ton of fun. And I love live TV. It's better than any roller coaster I've ever been on. However, it didn't create business.
Interesting.
And podcasting has, for sure.
Interesting. Well, and I would say, sure, like radio, TV, I mean, it's great experience, makes you think on your feet. You have to be, camera ready, no stutters, stammers, or ahs, and you just got to go. So it's great training, I would say. But yes, I agree with you. There's nowhere where I can go look at the archives of like your past news spots unless you happen to get those recordings.
Well, you have to buy the recordings, first of all. And then they're 3-minute spots. They're little segments, and people aren't going to that's not the kind. I know kids are watching, YouTube videos that are 90 seconds all the time, but that's not where you go for financial advice. That's where you go to watch cats do silly things. I think there's a better way to promote. Somebody who wants to learn about personal finance is going to seek out the knowledge centers for that, and there are lots of them in the podcast first. And I would also say, in addition to considering hosting your own show and having your own content, don't be afraid to guest on other people's shows, because quite frankly, that's how you reach other audiences that aren't your own. And you also learn a lot from other hosts, and you can do show swaps, and they can be on your show and you can be on their show, and that helps with guesting services and all of those things. I've had financial advisors on my show, and people thought, well, why would you do that? They're a competitor. And to me, they're not a competitor. Someone's going to choose us because they like what we do and they are confident and comfortable with us. The same thing's true of a different firm. People are going to choose that firm because they like and trust and are comfortable with that messaging. There's so much, and to use your word, there's so much abundance. There's a huge abundance of opportunity in our business and an incredible shortage of financial advisors in this country. And in fact, a ridiculous shortage of good financial advisors in this country. So if you're one of them, I don't consider you a threat. I consider you part of the tide that's rising our industry. So I'm perfectly happy to work with other financial advisors and see if we can't get that message out to more people. We all benefit from it.
Yeah. I love that you brought this up, because I think that is something that holds other advisors, planners, financial coaches, all the things back in their own space and keeps them from producing content, because they're thinking like, oh, well, the podcast space is so competitive or saturated. I've even heard that, which I have all kinds of facts and stats to buck that trend. But yeah, like share a little about like, okay, sure, you can search, financial planning or financial advice, something like that on a podcast app, and you'll see a lot of shows pop up. But I'm always through launch and coaching processes talking about, okay, but what makes you different? And why is your message different? And what is your niche? And there's all these conversations that separate you from the quote unquote competition. But then I love your mindset around these people are not competition. Like all of us can have a full book of clients and be so happy and reach everyone. And there's just so much abundance. So share a little bit more about that mindset and almost like how you got there. Did you ever feel like there was some competition in this space, or have you, like, what have you done to create that mindset?
Early in my career, I certainly did, and partly because I came into this industry in an area where you were competing with the guy or gal in the next office. It was an extremely competitive environment, and you were trying to be the top this or that, and it was actually very unhealthy because you didn't have teammates. You had sort of rivals down the hall. And so when I built BFG, I built it to be a firm that was a true ensemble and a true team. None of our CFPs have their own book of business. We all work together with company clients. We all share in that opportunity. We all share in a lot of the upside of the opportunity. And so I've built a different mousetrap so that I'm not competing with the person next to me. In fact, if anything, I'm rooting for them, which is a very different mindset. I would much rather have a high five in the hallway than want to deck somebody because they had a good day. Like that, I don't understand. That just, to me, that doesn't make sense. I've also, when you start looking for content to talk about for a show, you only have so many good ideas. I don't know about you, but I've got half a dozen at any given point, but not 100. There's certain things that you want to talk about that you can talk about that are impactful and that you're passionate about, but there's only so many. And so rather than saying the same thing over and over again, you need to have guests that have different perspectives and can share different things. I would also say you want to avoid knowledge-based things. People aren't going on there necessarily to learn. They want to hear stories. They want to get motivated. So there are 400 million people in this country, and they all have a different story. You could ask any one of them to share their story, their relationship with money, or their relationship with what they learned as a kid about money or personal finance or any of that, and you'll get a really interesting content that will be completely unique. It's not hard to find. Ask people to share their stories, and they're all different.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of stories, share the story of you getting your podcast started and some of the mistakes or like challenges that you felt. You mentioned it earlier, like you've made all the mistakes, you have all the experience to share with us.
I haven't made all the mistakes. I'm still making new ones routinely.
Okay.
I think anybody who says that they've never made a mistake and that they're perfect, you should probably run because that's just simply false.
I would agree.
Most of the mistakes that I made were in the publishing space because I never tried to podcast alone. I knew better by the time I was ready to do that, not to do it alone. I also guested on probably 50 shows before I ever tried to host one.
Oh, nice.
And so for me, and I don't know that you have to do it that way, but when I showed up at my first FinCon, it was 2017, I didn't know what a podcast was. I just knew that money and media sounded like a good thing. And so I went and, Michael Kitces says, Eric, you ought to go. And so I listened to him because I always listen to Michael. So, and when he said to do that, I showed up and I didn't know what it was. And so 2 years later, you fast forward, I've been on dozens of shows. I've launched my own show and I'm now speaking at that conference in 2019. Which is Twilight Zone stuff because I was walking around like a deer in the headlights at the first expo hall. Like, I don't know what these people are talking about. I don't know any of these folks. And 2 years later, I was speaking, and now I consider this like another family. I look forward to seeing everybody every year. And so the talk that I did in 2019, I actually have on my consulting website on the homepage. And if advisors want to hear about the specific mistakes and the goofiness and the things that happened to me, I mean, it's very funny, I think, and very personal, and I encourage you to take a look at it. And I know Virginia will put that in our show notes, but it's BrotmanConsultingGroup.com. In terms of the podcasting, the first year when I guested, I really didn't know what shows to go on. And I got some help, which was great, but I didn't know the difference between a great show and a lousy one. And I thought to be on a great show, you needed a show with a big audience. Well, that's not necessarily true. You don't necessarily need 100,000 people to hear it. You only need 100 if 50 of them are interested in what you have to say. So you're better off with quality over quantity. And so I stopped chasing the biggest shows and started chasing the shows that I thought would resonate the most with the people who I know and work with and want to work with. And that was actually a really interesting thing because it's hard to get on the big shows. And, it's hard because they're being pitched constantly by everyone. And yet, a lot of times that's less impactful. And I had learned this early in my career doing trade shows. Like, I didn't need to shake hands with 800 people and collect cards in a fishbowl. I wanted to shake hands with 10 people and actually know who I was going to call on Monday. And so I think there was learning around that. And I've told lots of people, if you decide to host your own show, it's not even necessarily important to know how many listeners you have. I mean, unless you're trying to monetize this and be a podcaster, you want the right listeners. You want people who are going to be raving fans about your business. and about your show and are going to leave you a review and share it with friends. And so I think we have to stop allowing our numbers mind, which, by the way, financial advisors, we all have metrics. Everything's a scoreboard. I think we have to put our numbers mind away, which is hard for us, and start looking at the quality, and the ROI from doing this kind of work is significant. I mean, I can trace profitability to these kinds of things, and I know they work. But what I couldn't do was tell you how many people heard the show, or the show that I was on, or the shows that we were pitching, or any of those things. And I don't think it matters. I mean, it's available out there in the universe somewhere, but I don't think that's what we should concentrate on. It's getting the right people to hear your message the right way at a time where it means something to them, not just a ton of earbuds who happen to be flipping channels and catch you.
Yeah. So on that track, I do find myself having lots of conversations around, well, when will this show me ROI? How many episodes do I have to create before I get a client that says, oh, I found you on a podcast? And I'm having lots of conversations around that. Do you remember that moment, that client, that light bulb event for yourself?
Well, yes, I do. And subsequently, I've now sat down with people and said, oh, yeah, I listened to your show and I listened to some of this stuff, or I read your book and I saw your content. And that's, from an ego standpoint, that's very cool, because that means that before somebody even took the time to get to know you, they were interested in what you had to say. And that's, yes, there's some ego involved in that, and you'll feel good about it. But the first thing that we did that really moved the needle was learning to put content out that people wanted that was free, and to promote that instead of promoting our business. Because what I found was people don't listen to a personal finance podcast necessarily because they want to check out whether they want to hire you. They're interested in learning something, or hearing a story, or identifying with something. And so we created a lot of landing pages and wrote some white papers and some other checklists and created free resources so that I could go on a show and talk about taxes, or talk about planning after someone dies, or talk about how to build influence in your practice, or any of those things. And I could then give a simple website people would remember, and they could go and they could download that information, read about it, and then learn more about me and our firm later. First, it's give people something of value that they want that's free. And that's another thing financial advisors aren't necessarily good at. But if you can figure that out, I went on one show and I was promoting a white paper on the 4 places that most Americans can put money in accounts where used properly, it's never taxed again, at least during your lifetime. And I have given talks on this to financial prosperity conferences and other things. And a lot of times even advisors don't get these 4 things right. And so I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I will tell you that if you go to lowtaxbook.com, you can read about them. And there are 4, and it's personal stories and everything else. And so somebody who's interested in paying less taxes will go to lowtaxbook.com. They might not remember our company name. They don't even remember my name. But they'll go to that. And once that's downloaded, they're going to say, oh, there's something here. I should probably look into this further. And then they find you. So one show that I went on went viral, and it was in my first year. It didn't create, I would say that the ROI was created for me within 12 months. But the ROI initially came much more from guesting on other people's shows than from hosting my own show. But what's interesting about that is it's easier to get on someone's show if you have a show.
Yes.
So you start talking chicken and egg here. It's like guesting on other people's shows creates new audiences, and I think has better ROI. I think going on other people's shows will make you more money than having your own show. However, if you have your own show, you can get on more people's shows to then have the ROI. So it's a couple steps. It's like there's some Kevin Bacon happening here. There's a couple degrees of separation. But done properly, the combination of free information that people want, and having a show that makes you relatable so people can see how you interact and hear your voice and hear the way you interact with a host, for example, and then say, yes, I'd like to have you on my show. Mm-hmm. That's what creates, to me, that's what creates revenue and further abundance for the practice.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I have watched people, create basically an entire monologue style show where they're just teaching. Maybe there's some stories in there. They change the name of clients to anonymize the situation and things like that. it's great content. It's really helpful. But what's happening is they are podcasting in a silo. There's no interaction. There's no opportunity to share content with someone else's platform. They aren't guesting. They aren't having guests on. And so, sure, you're producing content, but when I get a hold of that, I'm like, oh, I feel so bad that no one gave them this advice that, hey, reach out to some other people, get on their show, have a guest on your show once in a while at least. And did you get any advice on that in the beginning, or it was just like, this is kind of how it worked and how the cards fell?
No, I got a significant amount of advice because I hired a company for guesting services, and I hired a company to help me develop my own one sheet and my own sort of voice. And then, when I went to develop the show, I already had sort of people in place to do that. I already knew who I wanted to hire and was ready to go. What's interesting, and a perfect example of that is the time we're spending together today, Virginia, which I would do anyway because I enjoy your company, but my audience is going to get to know you. Mm-hmm. They don't maybe know you from Adam, but they're going to get to know you because I'm going to share this content. Your audience is going to get to know me. I would maybe never have met them in any other way. And so both of us have taken the authority that we have doing what we do and the platform that we have to create influence and then doubled or exponentially grew the abundance that we could create by doing it together. And so you're right. Podcasting in a silo, you might as well talk to a wall. But having the guested experience to me means doubling or tripling or quadrupling or at least amplifying the group of people you can reach who already have interest in, if not you, the guest. I mean, our guests are going to share the show. So why would you not have a guest on and have them so proud of the time that they spend and happy to do it that they're like, let me show you what I just did.
Yeah. I agree. And I would also venture to say that there's a little bit of quote unquote danger in only having a show where you're just doing interviews and we never hear from just the host as far as their expertise being highlighted. Do you have any advice on that?
Yes, it's a good point. And I think the way we did our show initially, the first 5 seasons, in fact, we were using a guested show every other week. And in the off weeks, we did something we called office hours because I have a school theme. It's about retiring being a graduation, so it's a school theme. So we did office hours. The TA is in. And it was Q&A, and I was doing basically a monologue on those off weeks so that it became more advising. What we found was, though, that those were far less listened to and far less impactful because there was no guest. So I try to make sure that not only am I engaging with a guest, but sometimes challenging them and sometimes having not a debate, but a conversation about philosophy and where do we agree and maybe where don't we and what can we accomplish through that. Because it does help you create your own voice. And certainly you don't want to argue with your guest on the show, but this isn't Crossfire on CNN or whatever, but it is an opportunity to share some of your own personality and some of your own thoughts on something and maybe then get feedback on them, even if the feedback is, boy, I wouldn't do it that way. And let me tell you why. It's like, wow, okay, well, we agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I can't support that more. That's awesome. I like hearing a little bit of banter, a little bit of not like an argument, but can we really like hash this out on a show? And you hear the two sides of it, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, now I get both sides. I get both trains of thoughts. I can choose what's right for me. So those type of conversations are really helpful. You mentioned earlier about establishing your team. Now, when someone comes into your practice, it's very likely that they're not working with you because you are the voice and face of the brand. You're focused more on content and promoting the rest of the team within your practice. How does someone think about creating abundance in this way, right? Typically, it's financial freedom, mental freedom, time freedom. Choice has a lot to do with it. How would you advise someone, a younger advisor maybe, on creating abundance in their business?
Well, first of all, I'd tell them to be patient because it doesn't happen overnight. I had no work-life balance for the first decade plus of my career. I lived at my office. And, there was no shortcut to being. It was a lot of long days and a lot of hustle. So I think there's no shortcut, and you can't cheat yourself that way. So patience does matter. But I also think mentorship matters, and finding somebody who can grease those skids for you by making introductions and teaching you how to do it, so you're not trying to recreate the wheel as a 22-year-old, for example,
right,
is a really helpful thing. As I've progressed in my career and in my adulthood and alleged wisdom, I created for myself something which I've now done with consulting clients, which I refer to as the Joy Revenue Matrix or the Joy Full Matrix. And it's a way to figure out how I'm spending my time and what are the things I spend time on that create joy for me. And I think joy is an important thing because there's joy and there's abundance. So joy and financial success or other types of rewards. If you can find things that you do that both make you happy and joyful and also make you more successful, that's where you should be spending the lion's share of your time. If there are things that bring you joy but don't necessarily make you money, you want to carve time out for that because joy is irreplaceable. So whether that's volunteer work or whether that's pro bono stuff or whether it's community things or whatever it is, make time for that because that's part of what refuels our tank. But when you find things that make you money or make you more successful that you don't like doing, outsource them. Find people who love doing the things you don't love to do. Find people who are good at and enjoy the things that you don't enjoy and let them be great, and it will make both of you more successful because odds are the things that they don't enjoy are the things you like doing. So the last thing I want is partners that are mini-me's. That's a disaster. What we need are lots of different kinds of approaches and folks. And then that last quadrant is the things that bring no joy and make no money, which you have to try and figure out how to get rid of. And some of it we can't. Some of it's continuing education or compliance stuff, or there's stuff in your business you just have to do. It's adulting 101, I realize. But if you can spend the vast majority of your time doing the things that bring you happiness and fulfillment and doing things that make you more successful, and you can surround yourselves with people who get joy and fulfillment out of the things that make you more successful but don't bring you joy, I know that's a mouthful. But at the end of the day, it's an exercise, and it's a 4-quadrant box, and we walk people through it and say, tell me how you spend your week. Put it all here, and then let's figure out what to outsource, what to get rid of, and what to amplify. It's that simple, and by doing that, it also helps when there's a new opportunity that comes to you. It's like, hey, would you like to do this? And before, it used to be, yes, 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 I'll do anything. Now it's, let me see where that would fall in this matrix. Where would this fall? Would this be something that I can't wait to do? Or would I wake up that morning and go, oh man. Like I woke up this morning knowing I was coming on your show and I'm like ready to go. If this was an oh man, then I would have said no to the interview.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well, thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for asking.
I love this matrix idea. And so this is something that you provide on a consulting service. And would you tell a little bit more? I know you mentioned it at the top, but you have the media company, the consulting service, like you have all these things. If someone is listening thinking, man, I got to talk some more to this guy, Eric, like he's got all this experience and I think he can really help me. How do they find you, reach you? Where should we follow you?
Well, there's a couple spots. First of all, our website, our company's website is bfgfa.com. People don't remember that, which is why I use the landing pages. But BrotmanConsultingGroup.com is where all of the consulting resources are found, and BrotmanMedia.com is where the podcast and the publishing and we have BFG University and BFG Library and all these resources and all these things, and it's an incredible amount of content. But the reality is I'm happy to chat with advisors who want to talk about ways to become influencers or ways to create more abundance in their practices. I take on a very limited number of clients, normally on a monthly and ongoing basis. I have a partner in that, and we facilitate team meetings, we facilitate executive retreats, we facilitate advisory boards. And that to me that's partly my retirement plan. I mean, when I graduate into retirement, I am really no longer client-facing in the financial arena, but I'm very much working with other firms and with people who are client-facing, both in our team and outside. And I feel like I can create or help people create more abundance that way, and that's fun.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And I'll have to have you on again in the future because we didn't even get to talk about your fun branding and like some of the thoughts around that. And we'll have to do that next time. So stay tuned, everybody.
The answer is yes. Again, it's a blanket yes, whatever you need.
Thank you so much for being here, Eric. This is so fun and informative. And I know there are some great take-home information just all within our conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I knew this would be fun, and I'm glad we had the chance.
Absolutely.